Hi, this is James Gordon here with a short story collection review. Today's book I'll be talking about today, The Best Short Stories by Ballard. This was originally published by Holt, Reinhardt, and Wilson back in 1978. This edition from Potico was published in 2001. This has a decent collection of short stories by Ballard. I read this book a very long time ago when I started getting to Ballard's work. Some of the stories I remember still hold well, others not so much, but overall this was a decent read. One thing I will say about Ballard's writing, I really like his structure. He's really good at writing. He's very detailed with his stories and at times artsy with his imagery. As there's a lot of moments in the book where it has these very beautiful yet haunting scenes in each story that I really enjoyed, and he touches on a lot of themes and subjects in each of his stories. So even the stories that I didn't like, they still had some interesting scenery, and they're very well creative and stuff. So this overall this wasn't a bad collection. There were some good stories I liked. There were some stories I didn't like, and others that were a little too weird or hard to understand what was going on for my liking. But overall, this is a decent anthology, and I definitely would recommend this book for sure. If you're curious about Ballard's work, I would definitely recommend checking this book out. But I would also add to check out his other anthologies, as they offer a lot more stories than this one. There is a there is a massive book that has all J.B. Ballard's short stories, and it's like over 1,000 pages long. So if you want to read all his short stories, you can just grab that, or if you want to check out each of his collections that offer different ones, they're probably the best bet, unless you can handle reading a lot of them. But overall, this was a decent short story collection. Alright, on to the review, and spoiler alert, I will give away crucial details within each short story. The concentration city, set in a desolated, inhabited Innopolis with no outside, and has an artificial environment known as the city, a 1950s era metropolis with transit streets, elevators, but mostly buildings connected to each other. There is also decaying areas that are abandoned with little residents living there. Franz M., a young physicist student, is trying to prove a theory from a dream he had of floating in an open world with no walls, calling it free space. Believing his world has an edge or area that's open space. However, his closest friend, Gregson, is having difficulty understanding his concept of free space. Fran's first experiment is building a vehicle that can carry him to fly high above the city to find free space. With the aid of Gregson, they build a rocket and test it at the Coliseum, the only place with enough space to try it. The rocket works, but Gregson wants to know the purpose of it. Franz explains he wants to build a larger one to carry him. Gregson is skeptical the idea would work and fears they might get in trouble for setting buildings on fire as the city executes pyros. Franz tries buying a building with enough space to test his flying machine, but is unable to. Franz then visits Gregson at his apartment and tells him he's trying a new method of finding free space. He brings him to the Biohistory Museum, showing him the birds have been evolved since they no longer use their wings, along with the oldest part of the city that doesn't go any further, believing there used to be free space millions of years ago. But still his friend doesn't believe him. Franz then asks Gregson how much money he's got and needs for his next experiment. He plans to find the edge of the city by traveling on super sleepers, rocket-powered trains that are normally used for one-day trips. However, Franz has discovered a loophole with the ticket system and plans to ride on it longer and to try to find the edge of the city. He uses the money to buy himself food and coffee while taking notes on his travels. Between trips, Franz buys food at the stations, reads newspapers, and sleeps until a super sleeper arrives and hides in the back cars that don't have anyone to avoid getting spotted. And continues his theory, but hasn't found the edge yet, and is shocked to find the decaying areas that the city is sealing up. But the long trips begin taking a toll on Franz, barely getting much sleep, and his back is aching from the sitting for long periods of time. On his last ride, he is shocked to find the train is going eastbound and hasn't changed its course. He asks the conductor if the train has made any turns, which both the conductor and passengers become suspicious of him. In shock, Franz reveals he's been riding on the train for 10 days. He is taken back to his sector and is questioned by police. He reveals his events to a physician who wishes him well and to abandon his experiment of free space. Franz still wishes to build his flying machine to find free space and asks what came before the whole city was built. The physician tries to explain this city has always been here. Still dazed about the events, wonders why Gregson has come to visit him. Upon looking at the calendar, he is shocked to find it's the same day he went on the train, as time is now going backwards. Deep End. Holiday and his old friend Gregory, a ex-diver, are one of the few residents still living on a tropical island in Bermuda. Earth has become a desolate with most wildlife near extinction, along with most of the oceans have been drained with only a few left. There is also oxygen mining to create atmospheres for planets, but this only leaves hydrogen, causing most of the sea life to be killed off. The heat is unbearable during the day, as most residents sleep until the day and only come out at night. People have been leaving for Mars to escape Earth, as it's becoming a hostile place. However, Holiday refuses to leave, as he spends most of his days repairing the beach along with salvaging parts. While at Neptune's bar with Gregory, they spot a white flash in the sky. It's an orbiting launch pad falling from the sky. Holiday wants to see if he can salvage anything from the wreckage. He and Gregory get in his Jeep and drive over to Lake Atlantic. While driving, Gregory reflects on what this area used to be until the ocean dried up, reaching the wreckage of the launch pad as is a CCCP. Lots of damage and destroyed parts and torn sheets of metal. While searching through the debris, Gregory asks Holiday if he threw him something, to which Holiday replies he didn't. The two of them suddenly notice something moving. Upon getting a closer look, they discover a dogfish shark. It's flopping around in what little water is left. Holiday believes this is a sign that Earth is still worth saving and creates a pool large enough for the dogfish to swim around and feeds it. Holiday asks Gregory if it would be safe here. He believes nobody else would find it, but is doubtful that Earth can still be salvaged. The next day, Holiday and Gregory return to the spot. However, they find a group of hoodlums on the CCC platform. Holiday yells at them to leave, but is shocked to find the dogfish dead. Holiday, upset, yells at the hoodlums to leave. Gregory tries to confront him and asks if he would like to have his dogfish stuffed. However, this angers Holiday more as he replies, "Have it stuffed? Are you crazy? Do you think I want to make a dummy of myself, fill my own head with straw?" The Garden of Time. Count Alex and his wife are living a luxury life in their fancy Palavia villa, wearing a black velvet jacket, a gold tie pin glittering below his George beard. With his cane and white gloves, Count Alex leaves his library and passes by his wife playing Mozart in the music room. Walking down the Rocco steps towards the massive garden, it's very large, filled with exotic plants and flowers and stone statues. Surrounding the villa is a tall iron fence and gate. Count Alex goes over to the time flowers. Very beautiful and powerful plants. They have the ability to rewind time. However, their lifespan is short. Both Alex and his wife have been picking them to keep themselves young. However, outside of the villa is the poor and working class, who threatens to storm the villa, hinting there is a revolt going on with the lower class fighting the rich. Alex has pulled these time flowers to keep them from attacking, but they don't have many flowers left. As the mob grows larger, both Alex and his wife know their fate is doomed. They go to the garden together to enjoy the last time flower before the mob kills them. They bust down the gate and storm the villa, killing both Alex and his wife. The following morning, the villa is in ruins and weeds have begun growing in the garden. However, their lifespan is short. Both Alex and his wife have been picking them to keep themselves young. However, outside of the villa is the poor and working class, who threatens to storm the villa, hinting there is a revolt going on with the lower class fighting the rich. Alex has pulled these time flowers to keep them from attacking, but they don't have many flowers left. As the mob grows larger, both Alex and his wife know their fate is doomed. They go to the garden together to enjoy the last time flower before the mob kills them. They bust down the gate and storm the villa, killing both Alex and his wife. The following morning, the villa is in ruins and weeds have begun growing in the garden. The Drowned Giant. A fisherman discovers a dead giant on the shore of the beach during the following morning after a violent thunderstorm came last night. It isn't long till news spreads of this giant, which causes everyone in the nearby city to go see it. The unnamed narrator, who works at the local library, is skeptical at first, but is shocked by the sight of the giant. People stand around as news reporters show up, with police unable to control the large crowds of people gathering to see the giant. After one person climbs up it, this causes everyone to approach the giant, including the narrator. The skin is pale with the eyes cloudy and appears the giant has drowned. Both people climb and run along the giant while scientists show up examining the body. Over the next few days, the giant's body begins to rot and stink badly. Locals begin hacking pieces of the giant. The narrator is shocked when he sees the left hand is removed. He tries not to return back to the beach, but is unable to as he sees more and more of the body parts being removed and vandalized. The head is then cut off and taken to a museum while seagulls and crabs begin eating the remains of the giant until it's just a skeleton. Several months later, people have forgotten about the drowned giant, claiming it was a sperm whale. However, the narrator still remembers the giant. The Terminal Beach. After losing his wife and son in a car accident and is unable to come to terms with their death, Traven has marooned himself on Inunuitak Atoll, an island used for nuclear bomb testing. Bringing little supplies with him, he intends to die on the island. Living in a bunker with a faded image of a girl in a magazine pinned to the wall, he wanders aimlessly on the island, finding what food he can in the bunkers and wreckage of B-52 bombers, with his mental state becoming worse. Over time, Traven begins to hallucinate, seeing his dead wife and son along with shadowy figures watching him. He becomes weaker and unable to move, and is later discovered by researchers who studying on the other side of Ikiwa Atoll. One of them, Dr. Osborne, tries to reason with Traven. He won't survive long on the island, but refuses to leave. Giving him the remaining supplies and a chair, Traven loses touch with reality and begins talking with a dead Japanese pilot he found on the beach. He brings it to the bunker as it's always watching him. He waits for it to speak to him again while his wife and son are also watching him. Traven finds his inner peace, accepting his fate on the island. The best short stories of J. Ballard was a decent collection. While not all the stories I liked, but most had rich detail, creating a very interesting, beautiful, yet dark scenery. Each story had a blend of sci-fi, dystopia, fantasy, horror, and post-apocalyptic themes, while touching on many subjects within each story. I like J. Ballard's writing style and structure. Characters could be either interesting or decent, with a few I didn't care for. While some of the stories had interesting settings or dark worlds, others I felt could have been better. However, there were some stories that I had trouble understanding or couldn't follow them or didn't like them. Such stories like Endgame, about a prisoner sentenced to death is living in a luxurious house with his executor, but only he knows the day and time he is to be terminated. I liked the idea of it, but felt a bit boring and wish it revealed what crimes the character was charged with and a better finale. Millennium, about a main character trying to find a place to live in a crowded city, felt boring as the main character is complaining about too many people taking up space. Wish it was about him killing people after becoming fed up with the overpopulated city. Other stories like Manhole 69, about a disturbing experiment of altering test subjects to get them to function for 24 hours without sleep. And Chronopolis, about a world where time is banned, felt really strange and didn't make much sense. Towards the end of the collection, I felt the remaining stories got too weird or weren't good enough for my liking. I really didn't like Why I Want to Fuck Ronald Reagan, as I couldn't understand what Ballard was saying or trying to explain with this story, along with a few others. Still, it's a decent collection of some of J. Ballard's best stories. However, I would recommend checking out his other short story collections, as they offer more stories than this one. Still worth a read for any Ballard fan. Alright, that's it for the review today. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, this was a decent collection. Like I said, some of the stories I liked and some of them didn't. But overall, I still enjoyed reading it. Alright, so I'll get with the stories that I liked in this collection. So it's the first one, The Concentrated City. This is about a world where it's just one big massive city. There's no like opening like areas and stuff. There's no like forest or anything like that. It's just buildings all connected to each other, and the main character is trying to find something he calls free space. A dream he had about being in an open area that was not connected to anything. It was just like, like an open area, and he's trying to prove his theory to his friends, and they kind of have a difficulty understanding his what he's trying to explain to them. And he tries several tests that don't get the results he's looking for, and it's kind of driven insane towards the end of the story when he tries to find the edge of the planet and he's unable to. I thought this was a really interesting story, and I was imagining this in my head, and when I read it, was like set in the 1950s. I was kind of like envisioning like the way that Fallout 3 and Bioshock kind of look in those worlds, where like the kind of like the retro tech mixed with futurism setting, and the main character trying to, of course, try to find free space in this like metropolis. I thought it was a really interesting story. If I thought myself, if that were me, I think it would drive me mad if I could not get outside. If it was just buildings, it was constantly being in. I would desperately want to find like the outside, like the main character is trying. So overall, I really enjoyed that story. Then my probably favorite short story in this collection is Deep End. This is a post-politics story about Holiday is like the last young person on this tropical island in Bermuda, and with him is just like his old friend Gregory, who used to be like an he's an ex-diver, and the environment has become so bad that people are now fleeing to like other planets like Mars to live on, because the Earth is becoming too unbearable to live. It's becoming too hot, and a lot of the wildlife has been driven to near extinction because of some. It kind of, it doesn't really explain what caused the event. It's either hinted like it's caused from war or pollution, or maybe a mixture of both. And Holiday doesn't want to leave. He wants to find, like, he believes that he's part of this planet. He wants to stay on this planet for as long as he can. And Greg doesn't understand why he should just go. And Holiday explains that no, he'd rather be on Earth. And he spends most of his days like repairing the beach and scourging parts to repair things that are broken. Like in the story, he's asking Greg if he's got any parts for his fridge that's malfunctioning. And when he sees this white flash in the sky, it's a launching pad that I guess is used to send like ships into space and stuff. And it sends all the debris raining down. Him and Gregory go to check it out to see if they can find like parts to salvage and stuff. And then Holiday discovers a dogfish shark that's swimming in what water is left, and he believes that this is a sign that Earth can be saved, and tries to help this animal. And this is the part I kind of forgot in the story. I actually thought he brings the dogfish with him and puts it in a swimming pool full of water, but no, that unfortunately doesn't happen. Instead, he just basically creates like a pool for the thing to swim around in, and he feeds it what food he's got, and he asks Gregory if the shark would be fine. And he believes that no one else is going to discover this. Unfortunately, the next day, some hoodlums come along, and they're vandalizing the wreckage and stuff. And Holiday is upset to find they killed the dogfish, and he orders them to leave. I thought, if that were me, I would murder those bastards for killing what essentially could be the last dogfish of its kind. Like, that would make me murder those hoodlums for killing a innocent animal just for the fun of it. So the ending is a sad, bitter ending, and then Gregory tries to comfort his friend by saying, "Do you want to have like its stuff so that way you can, have like something to remember of?" And this just angers him more. So this is one of my favorite stories. I like the themes of like, we should care for wildlife and stuff. We should be careful with our environment, because if we're not, this could eventually happen, and we could lose some very important species to our planet. So I like the themes and subjects that J.B. Ballard was touched upon in that story, and the whole setting. I really like the setting of the story. Deep End, it's really good. One of my favorites. The Garden of Time was a story I don't remember reading the first time I read this collection, but reading it again, I really like this story. It's very short, but it's got a very simple premise. It's about basically Count Alex and his wife. They live in this luxurious villa. They have everything they want. Alex has got this beautiful library with all these like rare manuscripts and stuff, and then his wife's playing classical music in the music room, and this place looks beautiful. And then Alex leaves the library, goes to one of his favorite places to visit, the garden, which is this massive area which got all these exotic plants and flowers, and he's got these these well carved stone statues. And in the garden is these time flowers, which are described as, they're short yet they're very powerful, as they can reverse the effects of time, so they can rewind time. It keeps Alex and his wife young looking and stuff, and they've been doing this for years. However, outside is basically is this like revolt that's going on. It kind of hints that there's a war going on where the poor and lower class have started a revolt against the upper class, and basically they've had enough of the rich, and now they're evading them. As I kind of got the feeling that basically that Alex's wife are kind of like despite like them betraying themselves as just a couple that just live in this villa. It's kind of hinted that they're kind of like villains, and the rich have been abusing the lower class for far too long, and now a revolt has occurred, and they're trying to storm Alex's villa, and he uses the time flowers to keep them from coming, but these flowers do not live long, and they're quite difficult to like harvest, and there's only a few left, and he knows that it's only a matter of time till till this mob comes charging in at their villa, and then decides to accept his fate when they're down to the last flower, and they know they can't win. I'm kind of thinking to myself, what, these Alex doesn't have security, it doesn't have guards patrolling. It was still a good story. I really liked this is like one of the stories I felt that J. Barr is very creative with his scenery. I could just visualize in my head how beautiful this place looks, and then I was kind of curious what the outside world looks like, and then of course the end of the story, the villa is in complete ruins after Alex and his wife have been dispatched by the mob, and now the garden is now growing with weeds and stuff. It's all destroyed. So that was a really good story. And then the next one of my other favorites, the Drowned Giant. This is another short story about a giant is discovered on the shore of a beach, and this causes the locals to come see this giant. At first they're skeptical, is this really true? But then once other people start saying, yeah, there's a giant on the beach, this causes a frenzy where people flock to go see it, and this draws like news reporters, the police, and scientists, and everyone to go see this. Basically, this giant dead body that's washed ashore on the beach, and the main character is an unnamed narrator. He basically works at the library, and him and his friends go to see it after being skeptical if this is even true. But sure enough, it's there, and everyone is like astonished by the sight of this giant, and this causes more and more people to come see it over time, and then people start climbing on it. They start running around on the body, and then of course people start doing things. They start like kicking the face, and then vandalizing it, and then eventually the body begins to decay and it stinks really bad, and so they decide to dissect the giant to clear up the beach because it's starting to stink badly. So they literally cut this thing piece by piece. I can only imagine how gruesome this process would be to cut like a giant to pieces and stuff. So it's a very interesting story, and then it kind of ends where people after the giant's been dismembered and stuff, and then it's like, parts of it are placed around the city, with the head being placed in a museum. Then a few months later, people have forgotten about the giant, and the narrator, when the narrator asks about it, people say, "Oh no, it was a sperm whale. There was no giant." And the narrator still remembers it was a giant. This was a really good story. I really like this one. I was actually when I was reading this collection, I was actually discovered that that TV show that I don't like, Love, Death, Robots. It's the supposed spiritual successor to heavy metal, which I disagree with. But they adapted the short story into one of the stories for the show, and I looked at it and I was not impressed with it. I really dislike the CGI they're using. It just looks so cheap looking. I was just not impressed, and I didn't like the way the giant looked in the show. To me, it just looked like an average man, just basically enlarged to a giant size, and in the book it's kind of described more older looking. So I just wasn't really impressed the way that they did that short story. I just don't like the CGI that Love, Death, and Robots use. It just looks cheap looking. And then the last story, which this is a story it's okay. It's okay. It's not one of my favorites, but it's got such haunting scenery and stuff. I thought it was still a decent read. The Terminal Beach. This is a story about a man who lost his wife and son in a car accident, and is unable to cope with their death, so he decides to spend the rest of his life isolated on one of the islands in atoll, which was used for nuclear testing, and he has hardly any food to survive with. He's struggling to like find anything he can, and most of it's kind of like rotten. And this really takes a mental toll on him, both physically and mentally. And he's kind of driven to like he's driven to madness essentially, living on this island. And he begins to see the ghosts of his wife and son. And he begins to see people that aren't there, and a whole bunch of other things happen. And the scenery that Ballard creates is really haunting and eerie. I just really like the scenes that Ballard creates in the story. I can only imagine how eerie this place would be to be there alone and stuff, and just how difficult it would be to survive. And this character is given a chance to leave, but he refuses to leave the island. He'd rather die there than leave. So it was a very it was a decent story. And like I said, it has some very eerie atmosphere and haunting moments that I really enjoyed. So I thought it was okay. Now, some of the stories that I didn't like were okay. Manhole 69. This was a really weird story. When I read this, I was like, okay, so it's a bunch of test subjects in this room, and they're told that they're not really allowed to sleep. They can take like a few hours of, like, they can take a nap for a few hours, but they have to be functioning all the time. And then they discover the truth of why they're there. I thought this is a really weird story about trying to make the human body function for 24 hours without sleep. I thought that's not that's very dangerous, as a person can die if they don't have sleep. It was just a kind of a weird story, and I wish Ballard had an explanation why the scientists were doing this. He didn't explain why. It was just some really weird experiment. Another story that I didn't like that much was The Overloaded Man. This is about a guy that he's like middle age. He's not really happy living in the suburbs. And he's kind of bored, and his wife is always pestering him to go out do things, and he doesn't want to. And he waits till she leaves, so that way he can relax in his chair, and then he concentrates hard enough to have like a out of body experience where he goes into like a alternate reality where he basically is in his own world, and he can change things with his mind and stuff. And this, of course, begins to take a toll on him towards the end of the story. And then his wife finds out what he's been doing when he discovers that a hidden video camera, which his wife confesses that she put there because she was concerned that he was doing something behind her back, and the doctor put a camera there to watch him, which this angers him. So his wife knows he's been spending all this time in the house alone. He won't reveal what it is what he does, and this causes him to have like a mental breakdown where he kills his wife and then drowns himself to escape this reality he doesn't like it. I thought, okay, this is different, but I wish, again, Ballard would explain why the character is doing this and what the world is like. He doesn't really go into much detail about it. Okay. What's another story? Oh, another story that I thought had an interesting idea, but I thought could have been better, was Endgame. This is about a criminal who's been sentenced to death, and he's living in this luxurious house, and with him is his executor. So he gets to relax and enjoy what time he has left until it's time to be terminated. However, he doesn't know the date. Only the executor knows the date of when the criminal has to be executed. And at first, it starts off fine, but then as the days go by, the main character wants to know when his time's up, and the executor won't reveal when. And he's fearing like all these methods, how the guy's gonna kill him and stuff. And he tries to escape once in the story. I thought the idea was interesting. It had some like a really interesting setting and some really nice scenery, but I just felt it could have been better. And the ending I felt was not that good. Let's see what else. And then Billion. This is kind of like another version of the Concentrated City, where basically it's in this place that's overpopulated, and you got the main character and this girl. They're trying to find a place to stay that's not overcrowded. And then they discover this house. It's very roomy, and it's like the most space they ever had. And the environment is just terrible. Like, there's a part where the main character says he's like been sleeping on this bunk bed, and it's like close to the ceiling. I thought I could not stand it. I think I would go insane if I had to live in an area that's just like, just with all these people living close to you and stuff. It would just drive me crazy. So him and the girl find this house, and then they allow two of her friends to stay with them, and over time more people start showing up in this house, and he becomes the landlord. And he first hated landlords because he felt they were evil, greedy, mean people. But then there's too many people, and now he has to start evicting people out of the house. And now he knows what it's like to be a landlord. I thought this was kind of a boring story. I would have preferred if it was kind of like if it was the opposite, where the main character just begins killing people because it's like overpopulated and stuff. I thought that would be better. I just kind of felt it was. I didn't like it. Um, oh yeah, and then this other story, this Subliminal Man. This one kind of reminded me of They Live, but instead of about the violence in it. So this is set in a like futuristic city where basically this doctor is dealing with this one patient of his who is constantly complaining about the signs that are placed around the city. He's stating that it's making people buy and consume things at an alarming rate, and nobody's doing anything about it. At first, the main character brushes this off, thinking the guy's just crazy, but then he begins to notice the signs, and he too realizes that he's buying stuff without explanation, and begins questioning his wife why she's buying things when they already have stuff. Like, there's a part where they have like 3 TV sets, 4 radios, and a whole bunch of other stuff. He's like, "Why are you buying this?" And the wife can't explain why. And then he begins to look into this and realize that the signs are playing a role with people like consuming stuff and replacing things like after a few months of owning something that's not even that old. So I thought it was an okay story, but I just didn't like it. And then the last set of stories I really didn't like. I felt they were too weird, and just I had a really hard time understanding them. Especially one of Ballard's most known stories. I find this kind of odd. This is one of his most known stories, probably because at the time he wrote it, he published this back in like '68, and authors didn't really write this kind of stuff. Why I Want to Fuck Ronald Wingate. It's a very weird story, and I had a vague memory of what it was about when I first read it, and then when I read it again the second time, I was like, "What the hell is going on in this? I don't get it." And then another story that I really had a hard time understanding, the Optometry Exhibit. This is from a well-known book of his that he wrote back in the '70s, which is very controversial. It contains a story from it, and yeah, I had a really hard time understanding it. So, if you're interested in J.B. Ballard's short fiction, I would recommend you check out some of his other collections of short stories before again, this may have some stories that might pique your interest or not, but I would just recommend checking out his other collections as they offer a lot more stories than this one has. Alright, that's for the review today. Hope you enjoyed it, and please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to October Library, the new channel where I post book reviews, book hauls, or official content. Until then, I'll catch you later.